Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the YouTube channel grecochess. The channel where we comment, we discuss, we analyze, and we talk about all issues of the game of chess. And this video is going to be a very special one. But let me first share the screen with you and explain what exactly is happening. Every year on January 1st, chess.com starts organizing a tournament where they invite all members to join, and usually tens of thousands join. This year, the number of participants was 55,394. The tournament started on January 1st, and the method is the following. Members are divided into groups of 12. Every member plays against the other 11 members of the same group twice, once with white and once with black. And in the end, whoever has the most points advances to the next round. Only one out of the 12. Players have only one day for every move and no vacations allowed. This ensures that the tournaments will end in a reasonable amount of time. We already reached March 4th, and after a little bit more than 2 months of the tournament, the first round has almost been completed. Only 21 games remain. Hopefully they'll soon end and the second round will begin. This year, as you see here, in my group, I tied for first place, and the result is that both of us advanced. Usually only one member advances, but in case of tie, everybody tying for first advances. And I advance with a player whose user ID is Amrahmed2812. According to his profile, his first name is Amr, his last is Ahmed, and this person is from Egypt. We both defeated all other 10 members twice, once with white and once with black. And in the games between us, we had one win each of us. In this video, I'm going to show to you my own win. We're going to go move by move. I'm going to discuss with you my thoughts, why did I play various moves, and try also to guess my opponent's thoughts from the beginning until the last moment. And in order not to spoil the surprise and the suspense, I'm going to reveal only part of the screen as we follow along the game. And now we'll join the screen of the game review. And wait to make sure we are showing the correct screen. And here we are. You see, I'm only going to show to you the left part of the screen where you see the chessboard. I'm going to hide the right part that is going to show the later moves and basically spoil the surprise. And a few words about, first of all, myself. My user ID is The Harry. I'm from Greece, and for the daily chess, my rating is 1327, as you see. My opponent, his user ID is Amrahmed2812 from Egypt with a rating of 1008. According to his profile, his first name is Amr, his last is Ahmed, and I'm going to call him Amr from now until the end of the game. A few words about the computer, how it works. The computer is going to evaluate the position after every move, and if you see a number here at the bottom, it means white is doing better. If you see a number at the top, it means that black is doing better. The number shows how much better is one player over another, with 1.0 means that the difference is the same as if there was a 1 pawn differential. Also, the computer is going to comment, quote unquote, comment on every move. The first few moves, you'll see a little booklet, meaning it is an opening theory move, the book move. Later on, it can be anything from 2 exclamation points, meaning it is a brilliant. 1 exclamation point means it is a great move. A star means it's the best move. Thumbs up means it is an excellent move. A checkpoint means a good move. And on the negative side, if you see question mark followed by exclamation point, it's an inaccuracy. Question mark is a mistake, and two question marks, it is a blunder. Also, the computer is going to use a green arrow to show which move would have been the best. And I might be using orange arrows to share with you my thoughts. And I have the white pieces. As you see here, I start first. I have the rating that is 319 points above my opponent, but this doesn't mean too much. All things can happen. For white, the most popular first move is pawn to e4, followed by pawn to d4, and then we have pawn to c4, the English opening. We might have direct the opening, knight to f3. This has the advantage that the opponent doesn't know which pawn move you'll use as your first one. You can use it later on. You may want also to push the pawn to g3 to prepare fianchetto, bishop to g2. And if you really want to surprise your opponent, you may push knight to c3, not to, I'm sorry, to c3 or pawn to b3. But I started the way I almost always start, the way that I know the best, not because they're any better than the others, but because I know it a little bit better. Pawn goes to e4. Armor is various choices. The most popular is the Sicilian defense, pawn to c5, followed by pawn to e5, or maybe the French pawn to e6, or the Turk pawn to d6, the Scandinavian pawn to d5, this is very popular nowadays, or maybe the Alekhine defense knight f6. But instead, Amor decides to try to quote-unquote surprise me by using the Owen's defense, pawn to b6. What is he trying to do? Because before one plays, one needs to think what are the opponent's plan. His plan is send bishop to b7 and then attack my pawn to e4. How do I continue? Occupy the center with two pawns, pawn to d4. It's wonderful if you can do it unchallenged. Of course, Amr continues his plan. No surprise here. Bishop to b7, attacking my pawn on e4. I have to defend it. How? One can, of course, push the pawn to f3. The problem is that one opens diagonal from h4 to e1. And if I'm not careful, queen lands on h4, and then I have to think how to defend. Also, with the pawn on f3, I cannot even put my knight on f3 to not to allow the queen to go to h4. If I push my pawn to g3, I'm opening my defenses too much. Another way is bishop goes to d3. But since they say knights before bishops, because more or less you know where knights should land, but bishops, you're not so sure, I decided to place my knight to c3. You see the little booklet? This is the last of the book moves of the game. Until now, these moves have been analyzed in opening theory. And Amber is the first one to break the opening theory by sending his knight to f6. Why did he do it? Because he wants to attack the pawn on e4 twice. Once the knight and once the bishop. And the pawn is defended only by my knight. So if I do nothing, the pawn is lost. Computer doesn't like it. You see, computer shows the green arrow. Computer thinks that pawn to e6 would have been the best, and thinks that this move is only a good one. You see the checkmate. Of course, myself, I see the danger. No surprise. I saw that the pawn on e4 was in danger if I did nothing. So, surprise, surprise, or no surprise to be exact, bishop to d3. The computer would rather have my pawn, so let's eliminate this line. Would rather have my pawn go to e5, but the problem is if I do so, I open the diagonal for black. Knight, but where could knight go? Knight could go to d5 on exchange or back to g8. Aber now decides to place his pawn to g6, prepare fianchetto on the other side. Computer again doesn't like it. Computer again would rather have the pawn go to e6. You see, before the move was just a good one, but now with question mark followed by exclamation point, it's an inaccuracy. Let's continue. My knight goes to f3. The star means the best possible move. And Amr sends his bishop to g7, completes the fianchetto. Again, start the best move. And after 5 moves, let's see what is the score. Every 5 moves, I'm going to share with you the situation. I'm leading by 1.3 or 1.31 if you want to add the second decimal digit. It's nice to have it, but not yet deciding the game. How do we continue? Both sides castle. My rook to e1 to have a nice central file, even though computer would rather have the pawn go to e5. By moving the pawn to e5, I attack the knights, and also I free my knight on c3 and the bishop on d4 that don't have to stay there guarding. But now with the rook, yes, I'm protecting the pawn 3 times. It's attacked twice, protected 3 times. So this means that one of my 3 pieces can leave without danger for e4. What does Amr do? Pawn to e6. Computer wanted it in the previous move, but now that Amr is finally doing it, it is an inaccuracy. Would rather have the pawn go to d6. Let's continue. My pawn goes to h3 to avoid the knight to g4, and this would give me the freedom to put my bishop on e3. Computer would rather have my bishop go to g5 directly and pin the knight, and then threatening pawn to e5. If I could move my bishop to g5 and then my pawn to e5, then the knight is lost, because if it moves, the queen is lost. Of course, Amr would find a way to defend, either move the queen or with the pawn to h6. Pawn to d5. When you threaten your opponent, just before we comment on this move, usually you don't do it because you hope your opponent is going to miss it. You do it because while the opponent is reacting to your threat, they don't have time to act on their own threats. Unless, of course, they are bigger than yours. And this is a good defense. I say the best defense sometimes is the offense. You attack, your opponent has to defend, you get initiative, and they have no time for their own offenses. Pawn to d5 inaccuracies as the computer would rather have the pawn go to d6. Why? Because on d5 it is blocking the bishop on b7. The pawn goes to e5 and consolidates the pawn on d5, so now we cannot start exchanges that might give more freedom to the bishop on b7. In addition, I'm attacking the pawn on e5, so Amr needs to think where to place his knight. What choices does he have? 3 of them are already taken by his own pieces. 1, 2, 3. So what remains? Knight to d7 or knight to e8. You don't want them because knight goes backwards. E4, you'll start exchanges where I'm attacking the knight 3 times. It's defended only twice. I'm attacking it 1, 2, 3. Attack twice, once, twice. So I'll end up winning at least a pawn. Or the last possible square is if knight goes to h5, pawn goes to g4, and the knight is lost. No matter where it goes, I'm going to grab the knight. Let's see what Amr will decide to do. Sends his knight to h5. A mistake. Exactly for the reason I discussed before. My pawn goes to g4. Great, says the computer. Well, you would have to notice that the knight basically has nowhere to go. And the knight would be lost. And winning a piece from the just 10 move is, I would say, very positive, to put it mildly. Where can the knight go? Being on the edge, it has only 4 squares potentially go. Let's look at them one by one. G7 is a bishop, its own bishop, forget it. F6 is lost from my pawn on e5. F4 is lost from my bishop on c1. And g3 is lost by my pawn on f2. Let's see what Amr will decide to do. Knight to f6. In these cases, what you'd like to do is, can you attack one of your opponent's piece? Your piece is lost. If you can do anything, the best that the computer could find is pawn to c5. This as you see here, does not really attack any piece. It may attack the pawn on d4, and if I did nothing, meaning if I took the knight, that's what I should do, I might lose the pawn on d4. Of course, first thing that Amr would do is take with the bishop on g7. No, no. Let's repeat once again. If Amr had placed his pawn on c5, I would have taken the knight on h5, but then I would have double pawns on the h file, opened my king exposed on the g file. Amr would have used the queen to take on f6, but still, a piece is a piece. And after the first 10 moves, because we just completed 10 moves, what is the score? I'm leading by 3.8. Now my advantage becomes significant. And no surprise here, I continue by taking the knight, the star, the best move. Queen takes back. Inaccuracies as a computer. Would rather have it with the bishop. Well, queen and bishop are in a nice diagonal, but look what will happen now. My bishop goes to g5, attacks the queen. Queen cannot take the bishop because my knight will take the queen. Queen needs to go somewhere. Where? Think about it. Ideally, the queen at the center may have even 27 squares to go. Of course, being on f6, it's a little bit less than that. I think it's 25 if I'm counting correctly, but out of these 25, many of them the queen cannot go. Uh, cannot go to the 2 squares behind, cannot go to anywhere in the 6 ranks. So 9 squares are gone, 10, 11, 12, 12, 13, 14 are gone. 15, 16, 17. So I think at most about 8 squares may remain. But let's see what happened. 2 of them, my bishop will take the queen. Here, my pawn will take the queen, my bishop will take the queen, the pawn will take the queen, the knight will take the queen. And so what does Amr decide to do? Minimize damage, at least takes the knight on f3. But now, no surprise, I use my queen to take Amr's queen, and I'm ahead by an entire queen. You see the materials is +8. Well, the queen is 9 because Amr took a pawn as a compensation, but by a queen minus a pawn, if you want to put it that way. And now it becomes -2 pawns, bishop to d4. But it's an enormous material advantage. Now, unless I make serious mistakes, the game should be mine. My bishop goes to f6. Why? When you are ahead in material, try to exchange to go to winning ending. You don't want nasty surprises. So I'm telling Amr, we can exchange bishop if you like. And Amr, what can he do to avoid exchange? Just send the bishop to c5. And of course, when you're behind in material, try to exchange. But if Amr decides to send the bishop to c5, what's going to happen is that my queen eventually will go to h6 and threaten mate on g7. So Amr thinks it's a smaller evil to change. Now knight go to d7, attacks my queen. We completed 15 moves and I'm leading by 5.1. Even though my material is +7 as you see here. But still 5.1 is an important advantage. Now it is my game to lose. I have to be very careful not to win. I have to be very careless not to win the game. Of course, if I leave my queen here unprotected, Hammer will take my queen, and now the game changes completely, but I'm not going to do it. Queen to h4. Why? If I can bring a knight to g5, I'm near mate. And even if I cannot win it, I'll have Amr to sacrifice other plans in order to stop this thing from happening. Amr places knight to c5, attacking my bishop to d3, but at most an exchange. And with being a heavy material, Why not exchange? My knight goes to b5, attacks the pawn on c7, and later on the rook. Amr decides the best he can do is take my knight on d3. I'm going to take back. Pawn to c5. He's trying to push his pawns and perhaps create a passed pawn. If you don't material, there are two ways that you can surprise your opponent. Practical, because usually they don't work. Either by a sudden checkmating attack. Usually, if there is background issue, it might work. But here you see my king. It may not be too safe. And if material was the same, really, my king would be much less safe than my opponents. But at least it doesn't face a background problem because the G pawns and the H have moved. I move my knight to c3. Computer would rather have my queen go to h7, but with a queen, even though a queen minus 2 pawns ahead, I'm doing so much better, I'm not worried. Pawn to d4, push your pawns. Hopefully create a passed pawn. Maybe if the C and the D pawn are exchanged with my D pawns, then the D pawn of my opponent becomes a passed pawn. And passed pawns is the other way you can surprise your opponent. One way, we said, is a sudden mating attack, especially when there's a background possibility. Another way is push your pawns and you never know. You never know, they may either promote or you may win material to if your opponent tries to stop the promotion. But no problem for me, knight to e4. Amr, you want to change your bishop with my knight? No problem, I love it. And Amr is doing it. I take back with the rook. Why not with the pawn? Because if I take it back with the pawn, let's go back. Then the d pawn becomes a passed. Still, it's not easy to promote, but why take the chance? That's why I use my rook part. Before that, we reached 20 moves, and the score I'm leading by 5.5. It is important, becomes higher and higher, and they really need an enormous blunder not to win the game. Pawn to 5. Amr is trying to attack my rook, but there's one little problem. My rook takes the pawn on e6. I got the pawn. Rook to e8. Amr is trying. The problem with for Amr after taking the pawn on e6 is not only I won a pawn, but now the e file is open, meaning there are no pawns there, and my rook controlled it. You want your rooks to control open files. That's the ideal for the rooks. Now, after Amr plays his rook on e8, I have two choices. The one choice is exchange. I'm ahead in material, why not exchange? The other choice is place my rook on e1, because by doing so, I keep control of the open e file. And that's what I decided to do. And I can change any moment I like. Now, in the e file, I have two rooks and Amr has only one, which means basically I control it. Amr decided to exchange one pair. Not sure how good was that, but if he did nothing, I would win a rook after the exchanges, unless his king went on f7. So Amr's exchanges, I love it. I have complete domination of the open e file, the one that goes from e1 to e8. I exchange a pair of rooks. Materially, I am a +8. And Amr tries to do the best out of a bad situation. At least let's get the pawn on g4. My rook goes to e7. Rooks, white rooks on the 7th rank and black rooks on the 7th, on the 2nd rank is the best. Why? Because here, first of all, I'm attacking 2 pawns. The one is really under attack, the a7. The h7, yes, with the help of my queen. And also the king cannot leave the 8th rank. And you may see here that I have a back rank, actually, a checkmate possibility. If Amr does quote-unquote nothing, meaning if he pushes any of his pawns other than the h pawns, my next move is queen goes to h7 checkmate. But Amr saw it and instead he moved his rook to f7. Now there is no checkmate. And we completed 25 moves. And what is the score? I'm leading by 7.0. or 7.03 if you want to count the second decimal digit. Let's continue. I'm ahead. Why not exchange rooks? And check on h7. And now I'm going to win the a7 pawn. King to f6, but I decided let's win material near the king. Also, if I got the a7, Amr can take the h3 pawn. So I'm taking the g4 pawn. Pawn to a5. Amr tries to see desperately if his pawns can achieve anything. And let's see. Quite often, if the player leading is not careful, suddenly out of nowhere, the opponent's piece can suddenly promote. I don't want this to happen. I've suffered a lot from ideas like that, and also won games a lot like that. My queen to b7, attacking the b pawn, that cannot be saved. Pawn to b5, queen takes the pawn, king to g5. And now my advantage is enormous after 30 moves. Not only have an extra queen, but I have one extra pawn, 5 versus 4. And computer says that my advantage is 7.8. It's not enough. Well, let's win another pawn. King takes this pawn. Queen to d4 check. King to f3. And now, ladies and gentlemen, if you want, pause your videos to find my next move. I'm going to give you a few seconds. You can pause your video if you want to find it. This looks like a problem. Checkmate in one. And no surprise, my queen goes to e4. Checkmate, I win the game. And with this win, let's share the other screen with you. Make sure we share the correct screen. And thanks to this win, I ended up with 21 points, exactly the same as Amr. So we both made it to the second round, and we're waiting for these 21 games to complete. The remaining games you see on this line, to find out who are going to be our opponents in the second round. But the review. Let's see the overall situation. I played with the computer makes the following comment. This is from an artificial intelligence generated codes that said you built a lead in the opening, then played a tricky tactic. I'm not sure which one they mean. Most likely my pawn going to g4 and winning the knight, and then my bishop to g5 and winning the queen. I played with an accuracy of 91.6% and Amro played 79%. I played as if my rating was 1900 and Amro 1400. Mine was quite more than my 1327 number, also quite more than his 1008. In the various categories, I had two great moves, book moves, 3 for me, 2 for armor, best 17 versus 8 for me, excellent 11 versus 7 for armor, good 4 versus 3 for armor, and inaccuracies, armor had 5, I had 1, mistakes, armor had 2. This concludes this game, and of course for armor, he played quite well, spite of a few mistakes. Congratulations to Amr, first of all, for defeating me when he had the white pieces. And in spite of his relatively low rating, he advances. Look at that. In our group, the highest rating was P. Barker's 1576, but this player withdrew. And then it was me, and then there were quite a few players with ratings higher than Amr. When the tournament started, he had 1899, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 players had a rating higher than his, and as though he was 7th in rating, he made it the next round. So, Amr, congratulations for you advancing. And unfortunately, this situation appears in many groups. Too many players, they register and then they don't follow up. One player withdrew, many players timed out, which personally I think it's very unfortunate. But in any case, Amber and myself, we are advancing the second round. That was the game that I won. And at this point, I'd like to thank all of you for watching it. Thanks to the subscribers, who have more subscribers almost every day. If you have not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. All it needs is click the appropriate button and you'll be notified of my videos as they come out. I try to have one video per day. Thanks to the comments and the likes, I've had quite a lot of encouraging comments. Next videos, what lies ahead? I'll try once again my luck in Puzzle Rush and then facing the chess.com bots. We are facing now the bots rated 1700. We started many months ago with the lowest rated bot of Martin that is 250. Now we're facing the bots that have 1700. This Friday at the Queen's Chess Club, round number 3 of the Winter Swiss tournament. I'm going to show to you my game. And that's it for now. This is the grecochess YouTube channel. I'm your host, Harry Lassaniziris. To all of you, thank you very much and goodbye.